Take a good look at yourself, not how you think you are, but how others see you. Have you realized that over the years, you've developed habits that make you less attractive, less interesting, and in many cases, even annoying? No one tells you because it sounds cruel, but the truth is, many of the things you do today are the same things you once criticized in the older people from your childhood. It's easy to blame age, to say it's just a natural part of getting older, but the truth is much more uncomfortable. It's not aging that makes you unpleasant, it's how you handle it. And the worst part? You don't even notice it. Your kids, your friends, even the people around you do. But you keep going, unaware that every day you're becoming more invisible. Today I'm going to shake you up with 9 things you're probably doing without realizing it. Things that are affecting your life more than you think. Some will sting, some will make you angry, but the last one will open your eyes in a way you might not be ready to accept. I'm Celia, and this is the moment to look in the mirror and ask yourself, are you truly aging with dignity, or are you becoming exactly what you once swore you'd never be? If talking only about illnesses isolates you, what comes next is even worse, because it doesn't just push people away, it turns your existence into a burden no one wants to carry. We've reached the second key point of this video, becoming an emotional burden to others. Not in the physical sense of needing help to move or do certain things, but in a much deeper and more exhausting way, becoming someone who only knows how to unload their troubles onto others, expecting them to carry the weight of your dissatisfaction, sadness, or frustration with life. The problem is, you don't do it consciously. No one wakes up in the morning thinking, today, I'm going to be a burden to everyone around me. But that's how people start to see you when every phone call, every meeting with your children, every get-together with a friend turns into a flood of complaints, problems, and emotional demands. And here's the uncomfortable truth. People don't want to carry the weight of what you haven't learned to handle yourself. They have their own problems, their own fears, their own battles. And when you become an endless pit of grievances, they start to avoid you. Not because they're cruel, but because their survival instinct kicks in. I know what you're thinking, but I just want to be heard. I need to vent to someone. And yes, we all need to be heard, but there's a difference between sharing and completely unloading onto others. If every time you call your child, it's to tell them how lonely you feel, how unfair life is, or how badly you've been treated, don't expect them to want to call you more often. If every time you see a friend, you hand them a never-ending list of everything that's gone wrong in your life, don't be surprised if they gradually stop responding to your invitations. There's a difference between support and the emotional obligation to carry someone who refuses to climb out of the hole they've dug for themselves. Stoicism teaches us that life isn't about what happens to you, but how you choose to face it. Epictetus, a former slave who became one of the most influential philosophers of his time, said that the problem isn't adversity, but how we interpret it. If you've convinced yourself that you're a victim of life, if you've decided the world owes you something and that others are responsible for making you feel better, then all you're doing is giving up control over your own existence. And when you lose control of your life, you start depending on others to carry it for you. Now tell me, do you really want to be that person? Do you want others to see you as a burden, as someone they check in on out of obligation rather than desire? Because that's the path you're on when you turn your relationships into dumping grounds for your emotional misery. No one wants to be the shelter for someone who only brings storms. If you want people to seek you out, start by changing what you project. If every time they see you, you radiate calm, strength, and a sense of purpose, they will want to be around you. But if every conversation feels like an emotional chore, I guarantee that sooner or later, they'll start to disappear. Don't mistake this for suppressing your emotions or pretending everything is fine. This isn't about faking happiness. It's about taking responsibility for your own emotional stability. If you feel lonely, do something about it. If you're frustrated with your life, change what you can and learn to accept what you can't. But don't turn others into your salvation, because no one wants to carry a person who refuses to stand on their own. If talking only about illnesses isolates you, What comes next is even worse, because it doesn't just push people away, it turns your existence into a burden no one wants to carry. We've reached the second key point of this video, becoming an emotional burden to others. Not in the physical sense of needing help to move or do certain things, but in a much deeper, more draining way, becoming someone who only knows how to unload their troubles onto others, expecting them to carry the weight of your dissatisfaction, sadness, or frustration with life. The problem is, you don't do it consciously. No one wakes up in the morning thinking, "Today, I'm going to be a burden to everyone around me." But that's how people start to see you when every phone call, every meeting with your children, every get-together with a friend turns into an endless stream of complaints, problems, and emotional demands. And here's the uncomfortable truth. People don't want to carry the weight of what you haven't learned to handle yourself. They have their own problems, their own fears, their own battles. And when you become an endless pit of grievances, they start to avoid you. Not because they're cruel, but because their survival instinct kicks in. I know what you're thinking. But I just want to be heard. I need to vent to someone. And yes, we all need to be heard, but there's a difference between sharing and completely unloading onto others. If every time you call your child, it's to tell them how lonely you feel, how unfair life is, or how badly you've been treated, don't expect them to want to call you more often. If every time you see a friend, you hand them a never-ending list of everything that's gone wrong in your life, don't be surprised if they gradually stop responding to your invitations. There's a difference between support and the emotional obligation to carry someone who refuses to climb out of the hole they've dug for themselves. Stoicism teaches us that life isn't about what happens to you, but how you choose to face it. Epictetus, a former slave who became one of the most influential philosophers of his time, said that the problem isn't adversity, but how we interpret it. If you've convinced yourself that you're a victim of life, if you've decided the world owes you something and that others are responsible for making you feel better, then all you're doing is giving up control over your own existence. And when you lose control of your life, you start depending on others to carry it for you. Now tell me, do you really want to be that person? Do you want others to see you as a burden, as someone they check in on out of obligation rather than desire? Because that's the path you're on when you turn your relationships into dumping grounds for your emotional misery. No one wants to be the shelter for someone who only brings storms. If you want people to seek you out, start by changing what you project. If every time they see you, you radiate calm, strength, and a sense of purpose, they will want to be around you. But if every conversation feels like an emotional chore, I guarantee that sooner or later, they'll start to disappear. Don't mistake this for suppressing your emotions or pretending everything is fine. This isn't about faking happiness. It's about taking responsibility for your own emotional stability. If you feel lonely, do something about it. If you're frustrated with your life, change what you can and learn to accept what you can't. But don't turn others into your salvation, because no one wants to carry a person who refuses to stand on their own. If all you talk about is illness, you push people away. If you become an emotional burden, you drive them off. But there's something even more dangerous, something that keeps you trapped in the past and stops you from moving forward, holding on to useless memories and grudges. We've reached the third key point of this video, and this is where things start to shift, because if you don't learn to let go, your own mind becomes a prison you'll never escape. The problem with the past is that it feels comfortable, familiar. When you cling to it, when you spend your days replaying what you did, what was done to you, what you could have changed, what was taken from you, or what you lost, you convince yourself that all the good things are behind you, and without realizing it, you become someone who no longer lives, only remembers. Someone who drags around the same stories over and over, as if retelling them could somehow change the outcome. But here's the truth: the past doesn't move. The only one still chained to it is you. Imagine carrying a suitcase full of stones. Each stone is a grudge, a disappointment, a missed opportunity, a wound you keep poking to see if it still hurts. At first, you can manage. You get used to the weight, even start to feel like it's part of you. But as the years go by, that suitcase becomes unbearable. And instead of letting it go, instead of releasing what you can no longer change, you hold on tighter, convinced that dropping it would mean losing something important. Do you see how absurd that is? It's not life that's weighing you down. It's the unnecessary baggage you refuse to put down. The strategy is simple. Stop telling the same stories. Let them go. Not because they don't matter, but because reliving them isn't serving you. Ask yourself this: does dwelling on that unresolved family conflict bring you peace? Does bringing up what someone did to you 20 or 30 years ago do you any good? Do you feel stronger every time you tell the story of how you lost that opportunity or how someone betrayed you? The answer is no. All it does is reopen the wound over and over until it becomes part of your identity. But you are not your past. You are what you choose to do with it. If you truly want to feel free, start by making space in your mind. The next time you feel the urge to repeat, for the 10th time, how your child disrespected you, how your ex hurt you, how a friend betrayed you, pause and ask yourself, is this adding to my life or taking away from it? If it's taking away, keep it to yourself. Not for others, for you. Because as long as you keep telling yourself the same old stories, you'll never have space to write new ones. Before we move on to the next point, tell me in the comments, where are you watching from? And if any of this resonated with you, type "Let It Go" below to show you're ready to move forward. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the like button, because what's coming next is even more important. And that final lesson, that one might change everything. Letting go of the past is a crucial step, but there's one thing that can ruin it all in an instant: neglecting your appearance and using age as an excuse. This is where many people fall into the worst lie they can tell themselves. Why bother taking care of myself? I'm too old for that. We've reached the 4th key point of this video, and if you truly want to age with dignity and respect, you need to hear this. Neglecting your physical appearance isn't just about vanity. It's a reflection of how you feel about yourself. It's not about wearing expensive clothes or trying to look younger. It's about showing through your image that you still care about who you are. But most people fall into the trap of resignation. Unkempt hair, worn-out clothes, a body they've stopped taking care of. And all under the excuse of, at my age, it doesn't matter anymore. Are you sure about that? Because the truth is, it does matter, a lot. Not for others, but for you. Think of someone you respect. No matter their age, chances are they take care of themselves. Because when someone puts effort into their appearance, when they stay well-groomed, when they dress with dignity, they send a clear message: I'm still here. I still matter. On the other hand, when someone lets themselves go, when they stop caring because they think it's pointless, they send a very different message. I've given up. I don't expect anything more from life. And people notice. Your children notice. Your friends notice. The world notices. The problem is, this kind of self-neglect doesn't happen overnight. It's a slow, almost unnoticeable process. First, you stop wearing the clothes you love because they're not for someone your age. Then you start throwing on whatever's easiest, without caring how it looks. After that, you stop worrying about how you smell, how others see you, whether you've put any effort into your appearance at all. And before you know it, you've become someone you don't even recognize in the mirror. What's worse is that this doesn't just change how others perceive you. It changes how you feel about yourself. Because when you look bad, you feel bad. And when you feel bad, you act like someone who has nothing left to offer. The most damaging consequence of neglecting your appearance isn't that others see you differently. It's that you start believing you're not worth the effort. And that thought alone can destroy everything. Because if you don't respect yourself enough to care about your image, how can you expect anyone else to? It's a cycle of self-neglect that leads to loneliness, invisibility, and a sense of abandonment that, deep down, you created yourself. So tell me, Do you really want to keep looking in the mirror and not recognizing the person staring back? Because respect starts with you. Your age doesn't matter. What matters is what you choose to project to the world. And if you don't see yourself with dignity, don't expect anyone else to do it for you. When you start neglecting your appearance, sooner or later, it also affects the way you communicate. And here's another mistake that's costing you more than you realize: repeating the same stories over and over without noticing. We've reached the 5th key point of this video, and if you don't recognize it now, you'll end up becoming that person. The one people listen to out of politeness, but secretly can't stand anymore. It seems harmless, a story from your youth, an experience that shaped you, something you love to share. But what you don't see is that over time, those stories stop being shared memories and turn into a broken record. Without realizing it, you start repeating the same phrases, the same details, the same gestures. And the worst part, the people around you notice, but they don't tell you. They just sit there, forcing a smile, waiting for you to finish so they can change the subject. Can you imagine how exhausting that is for them? Think about this. If someone tells you the same story 3 times, the first time you listen with interest, the second time with patience, but the third? By then, you're barely paying attention. Now ask yourself, how many times have I told the same story without noticing the bored faces around me? Because yes, people are polite, but that doesn't mean they want to keep listening. What's really happening is that deep down, they start seeing you as someone who has nothing new to offer. And when you reach that point, it's no longer a conversation. It's just tolerance. The real issue isn't just that you're boring others. This constant repetition reveals something deeper, that you're stuck in the past, that instead of evolving, you keep circling back to what was. And when your mind stays anchored in yesterday, your life stops moving forward. People who are truly living, people who are still growing, don't need to recycle the same stories because they're too busy creating new ones. But those who feel lost, purposeless, or uninterested in exploring the world cling to the only thing they have left, the past. If you want to break free from this, the solution isn't just to talk less, it's to do more. Fill your life with new experiences. Change your routines, learn something different, surround yourself with people who bring fresh ideas. If your only source of conversation is stories from 30 or 40 years ago, then the problem isn't your memory, it's your lack of a present. Ask yourself, when was the last time I did something for the first time? When was the last time I had an experience so exciting that, even for a moment, I forgot the urge to keep repeating the past? The key is simple. Stop talking and start living. Because people don't drift away from you because you're getting older. They drift away because you've stopped being interesting. And that, in the end, is your choice. If constantly talking about the past makes you predictable, there's something even worse. Something that will make people tune you out more and more, giving advice no one asked for. We've reached the 6th key point of this video, and this is where many older people start finding themselves alone without understanding why. Picture this, you're at a family gathering. You hear your son talk about a problem at work, your grandchild complain about school, or a friend mention a difficulty in their life. Without thinking twice, you jump in with the solution, the answer you believe they should follow. If I were you, I'd do this. What you need to do is that. If you listen to me, you wouldn't be in this situation. But what you don't notice is the slight shift in their expressions, the way their eyes drift away, the quiet sigh they try to hide. They won't say it out loud, but they feel it. Once again, you're telling them what to do when they never even asked. Here's what's really happening. Over the years, you've gained experience, seen things, gone through difficult moments. From your perspective, you know how certain problems should be solved. But here's the hard truth. People don't learn from unsolicited advice, they learn from their own mistakes. No one wants to feel like their life is a rule book someone else already wrote. And most of the time, when people share something with you, they're not looking for an immediate solution. They just want to be heard, not corrected. The sad part is that by constantly giving advice, you're not projecting wisdom, you're projecting condescension. It's as if you're saying, I know better than you, and you're not capable of figuring this out on your own. And no one wants to feel that way. Over time, people start sharing less with you. Your children stop telling you their problems because they know they'll just get instructions instead of understanding. Your friends reach out less because every conversation turns into an "I told you so" session. And before you know it, the phone stops ringing, the visits slow down, and you're left wondering what went wrong. The solution isn't to stay silent and never give your opinion again. It's about knowing when to speak and when to just be present. Next time someone shares a problem with you, don't assume they want your advice. Listen. Ask them, "Do you want my opinion, or do you just need me to listen?" You'll be surprised how much that changes the conversation. Because true wisdom isn't about forcing answers. It's about knowing when they're actually needed. If you keep giving advice no one asked for, you'll eventually find yourself talking to an empty room. And the worst part? When you finally do have something important to say, no one will be there to hear it. If giving unsolicited advice pushes people away, what comes next is even worse because it ties you to them emotionally in a toxic, self-destructive way. We've reached the 7th key point of this video, and it's time to talk about something many people do without even realizing it, depending on the validation of their children or grandchildren. And this is where reality hits the hardest, because if you keep expecting them to be the center of your life, you're setting yourself up for a disappointment that will cost you dearly. Your whole life revolved around them. You raised them, taught them, gave them everything you could, sacrificed years so they could have a better life. And now, without realizing it, you're still expecting them to repay all that effort with attention, affection, and time. But here's the truth no one tells you. They won't. Not because they're bad people, but because that's the natural cycle of life. Children grow up, build their own paths, create their own families, and if you're not careful, you'll be left on the sidelines, waiting for a gratitude that will never come in the way you imagine. This trap is subtle but deadly. You start measuring your worth by how often they call, how many times they visit, how much time they dedicate to you. If your child doesn't respond right away, you feel rejected. If your grandchild doesn't seem interested in listening to you, you feel invisible. And that's where you begin to sink. Because when your happiness depends on what others do or don't do, you're handing over the keys to your peace to people who, even if they love you, aren't thinking about you 24/7. They're moving on with their lives while you're stuck waiting. But tell me, how much longer are you going to beg for attention? How much longer will you depend on a phone call or a visit to feel like your life has meaning? If you haven't realized it yet, this is robbing you of your dignity. Because every time you get upset over what your children don't do, every time you stare at your phone waiting for them to reach out, every time you feel less because they're not prioritizing you, you are making yourself small. And it's not their fault. It's yours for giving them so much power over your emotional well-being. If you truly want to take back your life, the first step is letting go of the expectation that they are responsible for making you happy. They don't have to call you every day. They don't have to visit every week. They don't have to validate every little thing you do for you to feel okay. The only person who must give you that validation is you. When you stop expecting others to give you what you won't give yourself, you take back control. And here's the key difference. Enjoying your children's and grandchildren's company is one thing. Depending on it to feel alive is something entirely different. If this is hard to accept, ask yourself this. What if tomorrow they were gone? What if, for whatever reason, they stopped calling, stopped visiting, stopped being there? Who would you be without them? What would be left of you? If your answer is nothing, then you have a serious problem. But the good news, you still have time to fix it. The key is to build a life where their presence is a gift, not a necessity. Because true independence isn't just financial, it's emotional. And until you free yourself from this dependency, you'll remain a prisoner of other people's decisions. If relying on the validation of your children or grandchildren makes you vulnerable, there's something even worse, something that completely destroys the quality of your life, living in a cycle of complaints and constant negativity. We've reached the 8th key point of this video. And if you don't break free from this pattern, you'll become someone nobody wants around. Not because you're older, not because you have wrinkles or aches, but because your energy becomes unbearable. Look around you. How many times a day do you say that everything is wrong, that society has fallen apart, that things were better before, that young people are disrespectful, that music is garbage, that the government is a disaster, that life just isn't worth it anymore? Maybe you don't even realize it, but every time you speak, you're sending a clear message. The world is a terrible place, and you are its victim. And the worst part, you don't just say it, you believe it. You repeat it so much that it becomes your truth, your only way of seeing reality. Here's the problem. No one wants to be around someone like that. People like to surround themselves with those who bring something positive, joy, peace, inspiration, or at the very least, an interesting conversation. But if every word out of your mouth is a complaint, people will slowly start to distance themselves. First with patience, then with space, until one day you realize you're alone. And instead of asking yourself if you might be the problem, you convince yourself that the world is what's wrong. Want a solution? Here it is. Stop talking for a moment. Don't just speak for the sake of speaking. Before letting out your next complaint, ask yourself, is this useful, or am I just spewing poison? If it adds nothing, if it's just another way to feed your own frustration, then keep it to yourself. Because every word you say shapes the way you see life. And if all you repeat is negativity, that's all you'll ever see. I'm not saying you should ignore the world's problems. I'm not saying you should be some naive optimist. I'm saying you need to stop wallowing in misery as if it's some kind of badge of honor. Because the world around you isn't going to change, but your attitude can. And when it does, when you stop searching for the bad in everything and start focusing on what you can control, you'll realize that life isn't as awful as you made it out to be. You are just looking at it through the wrong lens. So now, you have a choice. Do you want to keep being the person everyone tolerates, but no one enjoys? Or do you want to reclaim your place, your respect, and your dignity? Because no one is going to hand it back to you if you keep feeding your negativity like it's the only thing you have. If living in constant complaints and negativity has already pushed people away, what comes next is the final blow, the one that turns you into a ghost within your own life. We've reached the 9th and final point of this video, and this is the truth that will be the hardest for you to accept: giving up on learning and adapting. This is the ultimate mistake, the one that traps you in a reality that no longer exists while the world keeps moving forward without you. Tell me, how many times have you said, "That's not for me, I'm too old to learn that. At my age, I don't need to change"? How many times have you looked down on technology, new ways of thinking, modern trends, acting as if everything that came after you was just the downfall of society? Maybe you believe that the modern world has ruined people, that everything was better before, that life made more sense when things were done the right way. But here's the problem. The world isn't going to stop just because you refuse to move with it. True aging isn't physical, it's mental. What makes you old isn't wrinkles or aches, it's refusing to keep learning. The moment you decide there's nothing new worth knowing, the moment you close yourself off to the possibility of adapting, you become a living relic. Someone who is physically present but absent in every other way. And the worst part, you don't even realize what you're losing, because when you stop learning, you stop connecting, you stop understanding your grandchildren, you stop engaging with society, you stop finding meaning in the present, because you're too busy clinging to a past that no longer exists. The saddest part is that many people justify this resistance with age. I don't have patience for that anymore. No one's going to teach me anything new. I'm from another time. Do you realize how absurd that sounds? As if getting older means becoming incapable. As if life gives you permission to give up just because you've spent a certain number of years in it. Do you think the world is going to slow down and wait for you just because you refuse to keep up? It won't. It doesn't. And if you keep resisting change, the consequence will be clear. You'll understand less and less of what's happening around you, you'll grow more disconnected from people, and eventually you'll become irrelevant. But here's the good news. You can still change this. It doesn't matter if you're 60, 70, or 80, there is always something new to learn. And I'm not saying you have to become a tech expert or completely reinvent yourself. I'm saying you need to keep your curiosity alive, to stop rejecting what you don't understand, to keep moving instead of staying stuck in what's familiar. The difference between aging with dignity and living in isolation isn't about how old you are, it's about how willing you are to keep growing. So tell me, are you going to keep telling yourself that you can't learn? Or are you going to take control and prove that you still have something to offer? Because if you refuse to adapt, you will be left behind. And if you get left behind, don't be surprised when the world no longer has a place for you. If you've made it this far, it means you have something many others have lost, the ability to hear uncomfortable truths without running away. Most people would rather deceive themselves, blame the world, or justify their way of living with excuses. But not you. You stayed until the end, and that means that, even if it stings, you're willing to see reality for what it is. But here's what matters. Hearing these truths won't change anything unless you do something about them. Now you have two choices. You can close this video, go back to your routine, and let everything stay the same. Or you can take each of these 9 things and start removing them from your life, one by one. The choice, as always, is yours. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from and type "I choose to change" if you're ready to take action on what you've learned today. Because agreeing isn't enough, you have to act. This channel, House of Wisdom, isn't here to entertain you or tell you what you want to hear. It exists to tell you what you need to hear, to shake you, to open your eyes. And if you're here, it's because deep down, you know you deserve more than what you've been settling for. So subscribe and join this community of people who have decided to wake up. Share this video with someone you think needs to hear it, because sometimes the right truth at the right time can change a life. And if you still have doubts, if you want to keep questioning what it really means to age with dignity, don't go just yet. Right here on the screen, I've left 2 videos that continue this conversation. Pick one and keep discovering what no one else dares to tell you.